Of course, in our studio, and let's discuss matters, sexual gender-based violence, especially in Nairobi, Narok, and Kiambu County. These are three counties that, of course, cases of sexual gender-based violence has been high. And talking to us this morning concerning that topic when it comes to sexual gender-based violence, seated to my immediate left is the Executive Director of the Coalition Violence Against Women, that is Elizabeth Munyinyi Wahome. And seated next to Elizabeth Munyinyi Wahome is Luna Odawa, who's a psychologist, and of course seated next to Luna is Lucy Wanja, who's a guardian. These women are here to talk to us about sexual gender-based violence and the project that they're going to be carrying out this year when it comes to ensuring that the welfare of women is well taken care of. And Mrs. Wahome, let me just talk to you about cases of sexual gender-based violence, and especially when reporting these cases in police stations. There has been a concern that when women go to report, nothing is taken into consideration. Some of them are actually turned away. Some of them, when they report these victims, there are claims that police officers tend to protect the people who've actually raped some of these women.
Thank you, Brenda. I wouldn't say nothing is done because first, in terms of addressing sexual gender-based violence, there has been a lot of investment by both the government, but also by civil society organizations like COVAL, so that we have had quite a number of police officers trained on gender issues and how to handle survivors of sexual gender-based violence. However, the consistency of the kind of support that is offered to survivors of sexual gender-based violence differs a lot. So that you will find that in a particular police station, depending on the commitment, but also on the leadership of that particular police station, then survivors are likely to receive very good support, including referrals for medical care, including how to write up a statement that will pass through a court process, etc. In some other police stations, also because of the inhibitions and perceptions and attitudes of not only police officers, but all of us, the attitudes that we bring into the workplaces means that there are sad instances when survivors will go to police stations as their first point of call after a violation and unfortunately not find the kind of support that they're supposed to receive.
When you talk about inconsistencies, why are there inconsistencies? You know, despite the fact that you're saying that different police stations differ. Yeah.
I would say that one is because of low levels of awareness and knowledge, but also the attitudes that people have about gender-based violence. It's for the longest time been treated as a sensitive issue. There's a lot of stigma around it, and because of the perceptions around it, and also remember it's often about power dynamics, it's often assumed that the survivor or the victim was at fault. They were responsible for what happened to them. And unfortunately, even persons in responsibility, persons that are supposed to be facilitating justice, hold those perceptions. Change will come, and change has happened, but it has come as a result of information sharing, knowledge sharing, and even training for police officers. Yes.
And you know, Ms. Luna, let me just bring it into this conversation. You know, we're talking about the inconsistencies, but there's the psychological, process that a victim goes through. Some even might want to kill themselves. Some even accepting what has happened, some even who end up being pregnant out of that rape case. You know, some of them want to probably kill the baby, some want to throw the baby, because they argue that, giving birth to this baby will actually give them remembrance of what happened.
Yeah, that's very true. Remember, this is a very traumatic experience. And we deal with trauma in very different ways. If trauma is not processed, then it will result into very dire consequences. If someone does not, for example, accept that this has happened, because denial is one of the things that happens, and so they would want to even not talk about it. So they want to hide away from what has happened. So what is that happening? It's killing them from the inside. So the only thing we'll know later on is that this person maybe has committed suicide, and you're wondering what happened. So one of the things that psychological support does is to help the survivors to be able to accept that this honestly has happened and that you can work through it and live a near normal life.
Yeah. And what happens in situations whereby, sadly, it's really sad that, some guardians or parents tend to protect, the person who's actually committed that offense?
Yeah, it's a very sad situation because, again, it has a lot to do with how our society and communities work, our culture. We tend, because sometimes the perpetrators are family members. So we are talking about taking your uncle maybe to court, taking your dad to court or to be reported for these actions. So people are trying to protect them, but they forget that the person who's been abused is going through also a very hard time. So they want to protect their name, they want to protect the family, they want to protect their family secrets, but they forget the survivor or the victim because they are really traumatized at that point.
So Wanja, what sort of guidance should a victim get in that kind of a situation that actually, Luna has actually talked about?
Well, what I would say is, I would say on my case, because my case basically deals with a child who's an orphan and is mentally challenged. And it is so bad because once you go out there, especially if you go to the legal system, you go and report, these people are seen as imbecile. So most of the cases that COVAO is dealing with is specifically on the cases of women or girls or even boys who've been abused, but they are mentally challenged. So that's quite a challenge, especially when you go to report, because basically the people that are supposed to be protecting those people, because I believe it is for us as a nation, as the government, as a community, the responsibility of these people is on us, not on just the caregivers. The caregiver is just there because they have nothing else to do. That child was born into their household and they can take care of it. But they do not have a voice. So when it comes to the legal system, maybe the structures are there, but they're not functional.
And talking about persons with disability, and I know COVAO is actually handling a case that happened in 2019 when a lady was actually raped, women and girls were raped, persons with disability, and specifically that happened on the 15th of May. And, some of them, there are different people with different disabilities. There are people who cannot speak, there are people who can't hear, and they're raped. So how do you deal with that, trying to seek justice for them?
Well, it is very crucial and it's very critical when you're dealing with such cases. But the problem is, when you go out there to the legal system, they do not understand this person. That's the biggest problem. So when you go out there to report, and the process that it takes for you to report, to get justice out of it, like the case that I'm handling right now was reported in December of 2017. And so far, we were able to get help from the police station, but so far we have had 19 mentions from January on a monthly basis. Yes, on a monthly basis, going to Kiambu, and you're just given a mention after another. So far, they have accrued to 19, and we haven't even started the cases. So the process is very slow. And then these mentally challenged people, they need a time limit on how they can remember the events. So it goes past 90 days, 6 months, they have forgotten the events. So by the time these people stand trial, they have forgotten most of the information.
Yeah. And she's talking about justice delayed, is justice denied for these victims. Let's talk about, and that comes in the project that, COVAO wants to do in Nairobi, Kiambu, and Narok. Yeah.
Which is actually ongoing as we speak. And even before we started implementing this particular project in Kiambu, Narok, and Nairobi, we were already implementing a related project that allows COVAO to go to court and facilitate access to justice for some survivors of SGBV that have intellectual challenges. Now, on average, Brenda, you will find that court cases will run for about 3, 4, 5 years without closure. It's expensive. It's draining on the families, it's draining on the organization as well. The reason why COVAO has been able to take up these cases is because of the use of pro bono lawyers who offer their services free of charge because they have an interest in human rights and gender issues. Ordinarily, it would be very expensive because, again, when we target the women and girls that we represent, we target women and girls that we consider to be coming from marginalized or vulnerable families. They would not ordinarily afford legal aid. So one of the challenges of access to justice in this country is, one, it is an expensive affair. But two, because of the institutional challenges, the backlogs in the court case, in the courts, it means that on average it takes very long for to secure a judgment of whatever outcome, positive or negative. People give up. and people tend to feel, you know what, I will never access justice.
Just the same case that she's mentioning.
Exactly.
You know, the case happened in 2017 and is still
Yes.
being mentioned.
Yes.
19.
19.
It's ridiculous.
Okay.
Yes.
And you know, people are wondering, when we talk about sexual gender-based violence, you're talking about women and girls, and people are wondering, why are men left behind? Because even there's some men who are sexually abused.
Men are not left behind. I want to start by saying that our mission as an organization is to address violence against women and girls. But that doesn't mean that the violence that happens against men and boys is not of importance. Remember that the Sexual Offences Act of this country provides for both men and women, boys and girls. It's a very fair act. But in terms of our focus as an organization, our focus is women and girls. We have organizations that have a broader scope. That notwithstanding, when we started implementing in Kovau projects on persons with intellectual challenges, we did have cases brought to us, including a particular case of a young man who had been violated. He had been sodomized. And based on the principle and the intensity of that particular case, but also the status of the family, we have taken up that case. And again, like the other cases in court, it has been running for about 3 years now.
3 years now.
Here in Nairobi.
Okay.
Yes.
And Luna, when you talk about, you know, the psychological support that you give these victims, when you give these victims, that there is a concern. You know, some of these victims tend to run towards NGOs like Kovau just to give them the psychological support they need. Yet they tend to, to shy away from the government. Why is that case?
Okay, anyone would run to a place where they feel supported and cared for. Anybody. And so for them, if this is a place where they're finding, this is where I can find the support that I need, they will get there. The other thing is that they may not know where to get this support when it comes to government institutions. So when Kovau comes out and says, we are able to help you, then they come, okay? So it's about how they can access. Is there information out there where you can go and find psychological support in a government institution? Are they being given that support if they go there? So if they came to Kovau and they're given that support, then they tend even to tell others who need that you go to such a place and you'll find the kind of support that you need from there.
All right. I'd like us ladies to take a short break, but when we come back, we shall be talking about the burden of a caregiver, you know, beyond the 2,000 shillings that persons with disability are supposed to be getting, you know, because these caregivers also are psychologically also affected when they deal with such kind of cases. All that after the short commercial break that we're taking right now here on KTN News.